So you're envisioning a future very rapidly. It's already here where we're already androids. And that is already the case because a human being with an iPhone is an android. Now, we're still mostly biological androids, but it isn't obvious how long that's going to be the case. And so what that means, like I've laughed for years, I have a hard drive on which everything I've worked on has now been stored since 1984. And I joke, there's more of me in the hard drive than there is in me. And it's not a joke, really, because...
Yeah, it's real.
It's real, right? There's tens of thousands of documents on that hard drive. And weirdly enough, I know where every single one of them is. So...
Wow.
So now we're going to be in a situation. So what that means is we're in a situation now where a lot of what actually constitutes our identity has become digital. And we're already being trafficked and enslaved in relationship to that digital identity, mostly by credit card companies. Now, I would say to some degree, they're benevolent masters because the credit card companies watch what you spend and so how you behave, where you go, and they broker that information to other interested capitalist parties. Now, the downside of that obviously is that these parties know often more about you than you know about yourself. I've read stories, for example, of advertisements for baby clothes being targeted to women who A, didn't know they're pregnant, or if they did, hadn't revealed it to anyone else.
Wow.
Right. Because, well, for whatever reason, maybe biochemical, they started to preferentially attend to such things as children's toys and clothes, and the shopping systems inferred that they must have a child nearby. And so, and you can see you can obviously see how that's going to expand like mad. So credit card companies are already aggregating this information. And what that essentially means is that they have access to our extended digital self. And that extended digital self has no rights, right? It's public domain identity. Now, that's bad enough if it's credit card companies. Now, the upside with them is at least they want to sell you things which you hypothetically want. So it's kind of like a benevolent invasion, although not entirely benevolent. But you can certainly see how that's going to get out of hand in a staggering way, like it has in China on the digital currency front. Because once every single bloody thing that you buy can be tracked, let's say by a government agency, then a tremendous amount of your identity has now become public property. And so your solution in part, and I think Musk has thought this sort of thing through too, is that we're going to each need our own AI to protect us against the global, against the global AI, right? And that'll be an arms race of sorts.
Well, it will, and let's posit the concept that it very likely corporate and governmental AI is going to be more powerful. But power is a relative term, right? If your AI is being utilized in the best possible way, as we just discussed, educating you, being a memory when you are forgetting something, whispering in your ear. And I'll give you another angle to this, is imagine having your therapist in your ear. Imagine having Jordan Peterson right here guiding you along, because you've aligned yourself to want to be a certain person. You've aligned yourself to try to keep on this track. And maybe you want to be more biblical. Maybe you want to live a more Christian life. It's whispering in your ear saying, that's not a good decision. So it could be considered a nanny, or it could be considered a motivational type of guide. And that's available pretty much right now. I mean, if it can be analyzing.
A self-help book is like that in a primitive way. I mean, yes. Because it's essentially a spiritual guide, in that if you equate the movement of the spirit with forward movement through the world, like faith-based forward movement through the world. And so this would be the next iteration of that. In some sense, I mean, that's what we've been experimenting with, this system that I mentioned that contains all the lectures that I've given and so forth. I mean, you can now ask it questions, which means it's a book, but it's a book personalized to your query.
Exactly. And the next iteration of that would be your corpus of information available, rented, whatever, with the corpus that individual identifies with it. And again, on their side of it. So you're interfacing with theirs, and they are interacting with what would be your reactions if you were to be sitting there in a consultation. So it's a very powerful potential. And the insights that are going to come out of it are really unpredictable, but in a positive way. I don't see a downside to it when it's held in a very protected environment.
Are you aware that your browsing data is constantly being tracked and monitored? Have you ever stopped to think about who has access to this information and what they might be doing with it? If you're like most people, you probably haven't given this much thought. But the truth is, your browsing data can reveal a lot about you, your interests, habits, location, and even your identity. Every time you visit a website, click on a link, or make a purchase online, you're leaving a digital trail that can be monetized by advertisers and data brokers. They use this information to target you with ads and promotions that are tailored specifically to your browsing habits. The more data they have, the more accurately they can target you. That's why we trust ExpressVPN. ExpressVPN encrypts your internet traffic and hides your browsing data from prying eyes. This makes it much more difficult for anyone to intercept your data or track your online activity. ExpressVPN is easy to use. Just fire up the app and click one button. Plus, it works on all your devices, your phone, laptop, and even your Wi-Fi router. With lightning-fast speeds, unlimited bandwidth, and easy-to-use software, ExpressVPN is the perfect choice for anyone looking to protect their online privacy and security. Stop letting strangers invade your online privacy by visiting expressvpn.com/JordanYT. That's expressvpn.com/JordanYT and get 3 extra months free. expressvpn.com/JordanYT.
Well, I guess the downside would be, is it possible for it to exist in a very protected environment? Now, you've been working on that technically. So a couple of practical questions there. Is this gadget that you've been starting to develop, do you have anything approximating a commercial timeline for its release? And then
it's funding. I mean, it's like anything else. If I were to go to venture capitalists 3 years ago and they hadn't seen what ChatGPT was capable of, they would imagine me to be somewhat insane and say, well, first off, why are you anti-cloud? Everybody's going towards cloud.
Yeah, no, that's a bad idea, the cloud.
Yeah, it's a bad idea. Why do people care about privacy? Nobody cares about privacy. They click here to agree. So now the world is kind of caught up with some of this, and they're saying, well, now I can kind of see it. So there's that. As far as security, we already kind of have it in Bitcoin and blockchain, right? So I ultimately see this merging. I'm more of a leaning towards Bitcoin because of the way it was made and the way it goes. I ultimately see it wrapped up into a payment system.
Well, it looks like it's the only alternative I can see to a centralized bank digital currency, which is going to be foisted upon us at any point. I mean, and I know you've done some work on crypto, and then we'll get back to this gadget and its funding. I mean, as I understand it, please correct me if I'm wrong, Bitcoin actually is decentralized. It isn't amenable to control by a bureaucracy. In principle, we could use it as a form of wealth storage and currency that would
and communication.
And why communication?
I believe every transaction is a form of communication anyway. So we got that, right?
You're certainly an information exchange.
Exactly, right? And then on top of that, encrypted within a blockchain is almost an unlimited amount of data. So you can actually memorialize information that you want decentralized and never to go away. And some people are already doing that. Now, there are some technical limitations for the very large data formats. And if everybody starts doing it, it's going to slow down Bitcoin, but there would be a different type of blockchain that will arise from it. So
this is for permanent uncorruptible information storage.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that. I've been thinking about doing that on something approximating the IQ testing front. because people keep gerrymandering the measurement of general cognitive ability. But I could imagine putting together a sophisticated blockchain corpus of, let's say, general knowledge questions, and ChatGPT can generate those like mad, by the way. So you can imagine a data bank of 150,000 general knowledge questions that was blockchain, so nobody can muck about with the answers, from which you could derive random samples of general ability tests that would be, they'd be 100% robust, reliable, and valid, and nobody could gerrymander them. Just the way Bitcoin stops fiat currency producers from inflating the currency, the same thing could happen on the knowledge front. So I guess that's the sort of thing that you're referring to.
This is something I really believe in, because if you look at the Library of Alexandria, if you look at how long did it take? Maybe what was it, Toledo in Spain, when we finally started the spark? If it wasn't for the Arab cultures to hold on to what was Greek knowledge, right? If we really look at when humanity fell into the Dark Ages, it was more or less around the Alexandrian period where that library was destroyed, and it's mythological, but it certainly happened to a greater extent. If it wasn't encoded in the Arab culture at that point during the Dark Ages, we wouldn't have had the Renaissance. And if you look at the early university that arose out of Toledo, you had rhetoric, you had logic, you had all these things that the ancient Greeks encoded, and it was lost for over 1,000 years. I'm quite concerned, Jordan, that we could fall into that place again, because things are inconvenient right now to talk about. Things are not appropriate, or whatever it's being deemed, whoever happens to be in the regime at that particular moment. So memorializing things in a blockchain is going to become quite vital. And I shudder to think that if we don't do this, if everybody didn't decentralize their own knowledge, I shudder to think what's going to happen to our history. I mean, we already know history is written by the victors, right?
Well, especially because it can be corrupted and rewritten, not only lost, right? It isn't the loss that scares me as much as the rewriting, right? And so
well, the loss concerns me too, because we've lost so much. I mean, where would we have been if we transitioned from the Greek, logic and proto-scientists to the proto-alchemists to immedately to a sort of Renaissance culture, and not go through that 1,000, maybe 1,500 1,500 year waste of human energy?